Welcome to Factual. If you're new here, please take a second to hit the subscribe button. It really helps. My name is Ember, and I'm an intersex woman of transgender experience. I also have a background in science and the arts, but on this show, we talk about stories relating to trans and intersex people like me. There's also a healthy dose of human rights, countering conspiracy nonsense, and other topics that get tied up in these issues from time to time, but we'll get to those. Thank you for joining me. And thank you to Alira, who gifted 10 memberships before we even started. Now that's a great way to start a show. Thank you, Alira. Everyone do enjoy all the goodies that come with memberships, custom emojis, member exclusive content, so on and so forth. And consider becoming a permanent member because it helps a lot. First up, we have a story out of Florida where an intersex teacher was fired because of anti-trans policies. It's almost like singling out one group of people for government-approved hate harms everyone. Who could have possibly seen that coming? So let's get to it. So this is a story from them. It's basically what I just said. Intersex teacher in Florida says school fired him based on the belief he was trans. Shepard Sculf said in an EEOC filing that a parent complained to the district that he was transgender. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons. As many of you know, I myself have a workplace complaint that's still pending. And we're very quickly approaching the anniversary of when I was forced out of my job. Now, one of the reasons that EEOC, or Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, we word things weird in the US, claims like that are difficult right now because of federal executive orders that just declare entire groups of people don't exist. Congress isn't much help either, because every law that they've passed recently targeting trans people has carve-outs to set aside and ignore the rights of intersex people. So while they're not specifically going against intersex people right now, the fact that anti-trans policies are tied up in this is definitely going to muddy the waters. So that's fun, perhaps. So Shepard, a Florida teacher who is intersex, and a quick reminder, no one is entitled to your medical history. If not legal advice, I am not a lawyer, but if you're in a workplace environment and people start harassing you, remember, they don't know if you're a cis person who just looks a little different, or an intersex person, or a trans person. They're not entitled to that information. You do not have to tell them. They can be suspicious all they want, but as long as they're harassing you without knowing, it is illegal. If you tell them, in some states, it may suddenly become legal. Just saying. So this teacher is alleging in a new Equal Employment Opportunity Commission filing that his school district fired him because they perceived him as transgender. And that happens a lot because we hear a lot about trans people in the news. We don't hear as much about intersex people because that's not where the culture war is. Because the culture warriors have a much harder time screaming about biological reality and coming after people who are born with a demonstrable physical condition. It doesn't work so well. So they just ignore us and focus on trans people, to the point that when they accidentally target us, they will go out of their way to try to make it look like it's impossible for intersex people to actually exist, and therefore they must be targeting a trans person. Also, fun reminder, a lot of people are both. A lot, not all, but a lot of intersex people are also trans. Because as it turns out, life in a binary society works a little bit easier if you align yourself a little bit more closely with one side of the spectrum or the other. Usually. So Scaife was assigned female at birth, but identifies as a male per the Monday filing. So according to the district, that may make him trans. But in the filing, Scaife claims that at the same time he was fired, he was told that his performance as a language arts teacher at Patriot Oaks Academy in the St. John's County School District was exemplary, and that there are no merits-based justifications for his termination. Scaife taught 6th grade and has been newly hired for the 2025-2026 school year. So the current school year that just wrapped up. At the same time, the district knew both that I have a male gender identity. They gave me a placard saying Mr. Skelf, and that I was assigned female at birth based on my employment paperwork, Scaife wrote. Therefore, I believe this termination was based on the perception that I'm transgender. Just 3 weeks into the new school year, Principal Drew Kyodo allegedly called Scaife in for an emergency meeting held on August 29th, per the filing. Scaife says he attended the meeting with a representative from the teachers union. At the meeting, Kyodo allegedly read a letter from the superintendent, Dr. Brennan Asplin. Per the filing, the letter from Asplin claimed, due to Scaife being a first-year teacher, his employment was probationary and could be dismissed without cause. Now that sounds a little like a threat, doesn't it? It's like, why would you put that in there? Unless you're about to, do something. The letter said he would be placed on temporary leave following a board meeting. It's interesting that this board meeting that, for whatever reason, decided Mr. Skelf should be placed on leave, didn't bother to, have him there so they could accuse him of something, perhaps. Who knows? But the way they do things in Florida tends to be declare now and then clean up the crosswalks you messed up later, so to speak. Scaife says he was given the choice to accept a probationary release or voluntarily resign. So either they would terminate his contract early because he was a probationary teacher, or he could quit. Forced disemployment. I gotta say, as shitty as that is, there are worse outcomes. For instance, as many of you know, with my own employment situation, they didn't phrase it that way. They didn't say you could be fired or you can quit. They just kept trying to hurt me harder and harder until they put my license at risk on purpose. So that's fun. Scaife resigned after being told by the union rep that a resignation would be better for his future career prospects than a termination, according to the filing. And this is exactly what we mean when we talk about forced to resign. Because employers, school districts, trucking companies, whatever, will often, instead of just firing an employee they don't want for discriminatory reasons, even in an at-will state, will still put them in a position, whether it's a hostile work environment or a double bind based on technicalities like this. You're a probationary teacher, where they have to resign. You can resist it, but then they can just keep making it worse for you. Forced resignation serves a number of purposes. For one, it makes them look more innocent. Oh, we didn't fire them. It wasn't discrimination. They resigned. But also, it has implications for unemployment benefits. If you quit, you have a much harder time getting unemployment. If you can at all. So that's what we've got in the filing. Forced resignation. Receiving this ultimatum was confusing and overwhelming. Everything had been going so well, and I couldn't understand why this was happening, Skelf told the ACLU. The start of a school year is always brimming with promise and excitement, and I was looking forward to continuing my teaching career at Patriot Oaks until I was cornered into resigning. Note the language. It was a forced proposition. It was an ultimatum. Quit or you're fired. It became clear to me that being fired had nothing to do with my qualifications or teaching. It is about who I am. After his resignation, Skelf said he received evidence that his termination was due to a parent complaining that he was transgender per the filing. Now that, how would the parent know? Unless, someone with the district personnel office told them. Now, it could be a staffer who says, that new teacher, that Mr. Scaife, I processed his paperwork and he's female at birth. He's one of those transgenders trying to get near the children and educate them, teach them how to read and other dangerous stuff. Or whispers, rumor, gossip. We've seen a number of cases over the past few years where cis people were accused of being trans. Because apparently it's okay to abuse people if they're part of a certain minority group. And so people immediately took the opportunity to abuse them, thinking they would get away with it because they thought the person was part of the minority group. And they only suffer consequences when it turns out they were very mistaken. But even then, the consequences all too often are sharply reduced because, legally speaking, you didn't mean to hurt a cis man, you meant to hurt a trans man. So even though you did hurt a cis man, which is a crime, you intended to hurt a trans man, and that's legally permissible. So, reduced sentence for you. Good job. The ACLU is arguing that St. Johns County School District violated Skelf's rights under Title VII, which was interpreted to include LGBTQ plus people through the 2020 Supreme Court case Bostock versus Clayton County, one of our all-time favorites. That one's for sure on the conservative hit list. There's no way they're going to let it stand because it grants equal rights regardless of sex, which is on the chopping block automatically, but also because it protects the L's, the G's, the B's, and the T's specifically because you cannot discriminate against a gay or lesbian person without taking their sex into account and therefore discriminating on the basis of sex. You cannot discriminate against a transgender person without taking their sex assigned at birth into account and therefore discriminating on the basis of sex. There's no way around it. And so they can't let that ruling stand or it will undermine all the anti-trans measures and all the anti-woman measures they're trying to enact. They won't be able to ban gay marriage like they want to. They won't be able to ban interracial marriage for that matter, like they want to. Intersex, the article says, is an umbrella term that refers to people who carry variations in their reproductive and sexual anatomy that differ from what is traditionally considered male or female. Fair enough so far. For example, an intersex person could have one set of genitalia internally and another externally, while also having differing sets of chromosomes. Some people can have ambiguous genitalia and might not know they are intersex at birth. While the medical diagnosis has been in use since the early 1900s, intersex advocates pushed in the 1970s to have the status be recognized as an identity and a community rather than a strictly medical classification. Which, to be clear, it might seem like people who are intersex having a community makes as much sense as left-handed people having a community. We're at something of a disadvantage in a right-handed world, but it doesn't necessarily make us all best friends. The reason the community aspect, the identity aspect is important is for legal protections, because it is still legal here in the United States and in many other countries for genital surgeries on infants or very young children to alter their anatomical structure to make them better conform to one of the binary flavored boxes. that seldom goes well. Like any worker, an intersex employee's talents and contributions should be what counts, not others' biased beliefs about who counts as male or female. Sylvan Fraser Anthony, the legal and policy director at Interact, an intersex advocacy group, told the ACLU. Intersex employees, more on them a little bit later, by the way. Intersex employees like Mr. Skelf deserve to be valued and respected at work, and they're equally entitled to the protection of Title VII. Now that, it may seem obvious, everyone should be protected by Title VII, but not so much. Title VII, like most of the other federal titles and most of the rulings have to do with those, draw parity and equivalency between male and female, but by its very nature, intersex often gets left out of that. From a certain point of view, intersex people don't really have rights in the United States, not even equal rights to use restrooms or sports facilities or whatever the hell else, but like the right to get married in some states, because while federal law says that you can't discriminate on whether the people getting married are males, females, mix, whatever, the whatever is open to some interpretation. Now, most people do intersex people the courtesy of simply treating us like the kind of person that we are, instead of getting all hyper fixated on genetic or anatomical anomalies, because that's gross, weird, and stupid. But the point is, if they wanted to get pedantic about it, a lot of people could. And at the present political moment, there are a lot of people who are overly interested in people's chromosomes and gonads and anatomies and so forth, and think it is their business what is in everyone else's pants. Punishing someone because of a variation in their sex characteristics or perceived nonconformity with the sex they were assigned at birth is plainly impermissible, and employers must understand that these forms of sex discrimination will have consequences. And that's sort of what we have to fight for, both as trans people and as intersex people, both groups, because intersex people get the same shit as trans people do for the same reason. You don't look like a thing I think you should be. Therefore, you're a bad person, I guess. And remember, there is some subjectiveness in what determines intersex. Medically speaking, it's any characteristic linked to sex that doesn't fit all the way on one side or the other of the spectrum. Some people would take that to include conditions like PCOS or PMOS, where a female woman person develops facial hair because of elevated testosterone. Hairy girls are still girls. But other people would say, no, that's not an intersex condition. That's just like some kind of anomaly or something. And therefore, they're actually men, though, somehow. It's really gross. It's bioessentialist. It's super misogynistic. It's telling women they can't be women because of some ridiculous idea you have, but talking about biological reality at the same time. It's so fucked up. When contracted by the, I think it's supposed to say contacted, but it does say contracted. I blame Grammarly or whatever autocorrect they use. When contacted by them, Christina H. Upchurch, Executive Director for Community Relations at St. John's County School District, wrote, "We will not comment on pending litigation." I mean, as journalists, they have to put that in there, but like also, of course, that's what they're going to say, not necessarily because they're in the wrong, but because a lot of corporations, even public corporations like school districts, have that as a policy. Don't comment on currently ongoing legal processes, investigations, litigation, charges, anything. Don't do that. No. It's a bad idea. While LGBTQ plus workers have federal non-discrimination protections, asterisk, which the Trump administration seems loath to enforce, true, state-level protections vary widely, and in the case of Florida, can even change drastically from county to county, which is another one of the issues, one of the reasons we need intersex organizations the same way we need trans rights organizations. Because just like in the old days, when a woman could drive from one state to another and lose the right to vote or the ability to own her own property, if you, as a trans or intersex person, can go from one county to another and lose the ability to not be fired because of who you are, that very most basic level of legal protection, that's fucked up. We got to do something about that shit. In 2021, prior to the election of Ronald DeSantis, the Florida Commission on Human Relations affirmed that LGBTQ plus people statewide are protected from workplace discrimination. However, following DeSantis's election to the governorship, just like whenever a fascist takes over, the laws go out the window, and LGBTQ plus rights in the state have eroded to the point that nonprofit Equality Florida is the name of the nonprofit, issued a travel advisory for queer and trans people looking to visit. Florida's own nonprofit is saying, fellow rainbow folks, fellow members of the alphabet, it is not safe here. Don't come here. It's unfortunate because there is a vibrant queer community. You may have seen in the past year, there have been a lot of new YouTube programs being put forward by a production company derived from Out Magazine. And they, the last time I looked, they had like 6 or 7 different shows on different channels across the YouTubes. And it's all produced by this queer community that's based in, I want to say, Miami. It's been a minute since I've seen them, but the point is, there is a vibrant community, or at least there was. Maybe they all moved away now, so they can have some rights or something. My goodness. Alrighty, folks. I have another story about intersex people. It may take me a little bit of time, so I'm tempted to take a little break now. Before we do, though, I want to show y'all that I'm up to something. Of course I'm up to something. I'm always up to something. As many of you know, I also run a Comic-Con here in New York State called NocoCon, and it has a YouTube channel. And I've been working on the videos from this past year's event. It happens in the first weekend in June. And so the first video is coming out on Saturday, asterisk. And that's going to be a basically a TikTok celebrity D&D game, right? There's a YouTube person named Matt Gordon, who has a relatively large channel, who DMs the game. There's a bunch of nerdy people, Panda Red and Would You Kindly and Desi Dream, a bunch of fascinating nerdy people from the interwebs who you may have heard of. That video comes out on Saturday. I'm setting up a thing. I'm starting to do a thing, and it's this. I'm going to start doing live shows because, as many of you know, I'm not in great shape health-wise, and not to get too much into the weeds there, I want to put some of the energy into more low-key stuff that doesn't have such high political stakes. And I want to spread joy and nerdery and so forth, and basically try to have some fun with the time I have. And so I'm going to be doing live shows over there. There's one already set up. And Matt Gordon will be joining me to talk about Dungeons and Dragons because he was the DM on the stage show. It's tentatively set for the following Friday. June 26th. That's probably going to change because he hasn't confirmed a time with me. He confirmed he'll come, but he hasn't confirmed a time. So if you would be so kind as to go to NocoCon here on YouTube, I'll put a link to this live specifically so you can hit the notify me if you want. But please do take a second to hit the subscribe button over there and maybe ring the notification bell, maybe hit the notify me button, maybe hit some other buttons, whatever it is you want to do. But if you would so very kindly subscribe over there, and even if you're not interested in D&D, there's going to be other nerdy stuff coming up. We do everything at our Comic-Con. We do sci-fi, we do fantasy. Next year's convention's overarching theme is Pokemon. Like, we're into everything, and I want to try to sample all of it if I can. So I guarantee there's something for everybody over there, or I'll do my best anyway. So please do subscribe. If everyone who watches this video subscribes, I can turn on the buttons on that channel for memberships and redirects and all the cool things. Right now, that channel already has the watch time. I just need the subscribers. But also, I think you'd really enjoy it. So please, please, please go hit the buttons at NOCOCON here on the YouTubes. So yeah, all right, I will take a quick break and then we will get into our next main story. Why did I hide my breaks? Why am I like this? You know what? Let's promo another thing that's coming up, shall we?
Are you an atheist, agnostic, humanist, free thinker, or someone who's just not sure? You're in luck.
Around here, that can feel kind of lonely sometimes. But if you haven't heard of NanoCon, the Nashville Nuns Convention yet, congrats! You just found your people.
It's an awesome convention near Nashville, Tennessee, at a beautiful state park, headlined by some of the biggest names in the secular community. And there are a ton of interesting things to choose from.
There are over 20 workshops and panels to choose from, and a genuinely good time to be had at a gorgeous lakeside lodge that's ours for the entire weekend.
NanoCon is held just outside of Nashville at the amazing Montgomery Bell State Park. The full event runs from Friday, July 31st through Sunday, August 2nd.
Come for a full weekend of community, educational talks, and so much fun, like the Magic Show by Matt Delonte, or just show up on Saturday for main programming.
There are only 300 tickets to go around, so go to www.nanocon.rocks and get your tickets so you can come celebrate NanoCon's 10th anniversary with other heathens like me.
So I realized that I just talked about NocoCon and then ran a promo for NanoCon. The two are very different events. However, the first time I heard about NanoCon, because I'd already been producing NocoCon for years before I ever showed up here on the secular YouTubes, I thought, wow, those names are awfully similar. I wonder if NanoCon is a smaller event. And as you just heard, there's only 300 tickets available. So yeah, it tickles me. And interestingly enough, it may amuse you all to know that I won't even have the distinction of being the only person to attend both events, because Forrest Valkai is a former guest celebrity at NocoCon, so he also will have been at both events. But that's okay. I can live with that. All right, so this story, this is about another intersex person, an intersex person that you really should hear about. And this is from Interact. I told you we'd hear more about them in a minute. They are the Intersex Advocacy Youth Group, or Youth Intersex Advocacy Group. Words are hard. And this person, Emi Koyama, is a founder of this group. She passed away recently. And so I want to talk a little bit about her. So Emi, I'll just read the thing. That's what we do here. Emi Koyama had an enormous impact on the intersex movement from its early days. She was a prolific writer and teacher, and her work deeply influenced my understanding of intersectional feminism and critical disability theory, framing my understanding in the context of intersex rights. She was a founding member of Interact's advisory board, which was then known as the Institute for Intersex Children and the Law. Remember, the reason we need community and activism is to protect other children like us from unnecessary surgeries that are being forced on everyone to enforce the patriarchy, to make you conform to this fictional binary that doesn't exist, or more specifically, to make us conform. And this shouldn't even be a political issue, you know? Like, the extremists on the far right keep saying that, like, you need to stop mutilating babies. But they're the ones mutilating babies. And those of us who were those babies are very unhappy about that. And we don't want that done to any other children. So that's why we need community. That's why we need advocacy. And that's why we need to focus on the law and such. Here we are. She was at the round table where we crafted our initial blueprint for action, a document that shaped our strategy for many years. She was also intent on accountability for the doctors who promoted harmful interventions on intersex children. She named names, attended talks, asked hard questions, and published what she learned. While I'm not at liberty to share the details, her extensive archives were crucial at an important moment of accountability for one such surgeon. I'm grateful to have known her and learned from her. Rest in power, Emi. So she did a lot. Most especially, different tab. She wrote this, the Trans Feminist Manifesto. She literally wrote the book on intersectional feminism in the 21st century, published in 2001, and since republished in a whole bunch of other places. You can find it all over the dang internet. This is from Emi Koyama. We're not going to read the whole thing, I promise. But you can, if you want. Like I said, the Trans Feminist Manifesto, you can find it all over the interwebs. The latter half of the 20th century witnessed an unprecedented broadening of American feminist movement as a result of the participation of diverse groups of women. When a group of women who had previously been marginalized within the mainstream feminist movement broke through silence, demanding their rightful place within it, they were first accused of fragmenting feminism in trivial matters. Then they were eventually accepted and welcomed as a valuable part of the feminist thought. We have become increasingly aware that the diversity is our strength, not weakness. No temporary fragmentation or polarization is too severe to nullify the ultimate virtues of inclusive coalition politics. Duh. We know how this is how this works. We have to work together with individuals. I see my audio's cutting in and out, so I'm trying to get to the bottom of it while I keep talking. We went through the lavender scare, more on that later, where the feminists tried to separate themselves from the lesbians and LGBT people generally. No, we want women's rights, but not those women, though. We saw the same thing during the civil rights movement, when, and in fact, all the way back to the first wave, votes for women, the suffragettes. Not black women, though. Every time we go through this, every time a marginalized group speaks up, and it's really obvious that feminism applies to them too, there's always some loud regressives who say, no, not them. And then there's years of debate, because people are totally debatable, and discussion and discourse, and occasionally violence, until eventually, inevitably, the obvious just gets accepted. And there's still regressives running around. There's still people like, let's not get into the specifics, but there's still people out there who say that Black women don't deserve women's rights, or lesbians don't deserve women's rights. In fact, lesbians, despite the fact they're women, and everyone agrees on that, shouldn't be allowed in locker rooms with women because they might violate them or something. And of course, there's nothing to that. There's no statistical data to back that up. Out of all possible demographics, lesbians are like the least likely to commit violent crimes. But facts don't matter to people who want to wage a culture war. C'est la vie. I went and lost my place. How dare I? Okay, every time a group of women previously silenced begins to speak out, other feminists are challenged to rethink their ideas of whom they represent and what they stand for. While this process sometimes leads to a painful realization of our own biases and internalized oppressions as feminists, it eventually benefits the movement by widening our perspectives and constituency. It is under this understanding that we declare that the time has come for trans women to openly take part in the feminist revolution, further expanding the scope of the movement. Right, and it says, she who shall not be named. Oh, she's coming up later too. Stay tuned. I wish I could do like a teaser for every episode to show people some of the interesting stuff that's coming, like the thing that's on the thumbnail, if you saw the thumbnail. Now, I also should say, since I'm interrupting myself anyway, I have a severe thunderstorm and tornado warning in my area. There is a non-zero chance I'll lose power. If I do, oof, I'll get to the rest of the stories that I want to do today another day. Fret not, we will cover the things eventually. But there is a chance that I will just disappear, like sorcery or something. Trans is often used as an inclusive term encompassing a wide range of gender norm violations that involve some discontinuity between one's sex assigned at birth to his or her gender identity and or expression. Now, that's a good point to make because there's a lot of gender nonconforming people who aren't trans, like butch lesbians, for example, who do and always have been confused for men. It's not great. Let's see. Stay tuned for possible flying ember. Oh no. I mean, I've been accused of flying a few different times in a few different ways recently. Although my personal favorite is I don't want to invoke things that I'm not supposed to talk about, but a certain individual called me a certain slur that generally only applies to women, and it did make me giggle a little bit. It's one of those euphoria situations, the ew, but also phoria, because like the person is gross and horrible and more than a little evil. The person is out to cause harm, specifically to me. So ew. But also the fact that this person is like campaigning to do harm to me, and still, when worked up and agitated, still thinks of me as who I am. When the bigots forget to do the mental gymnastics when they're attempting to misgender people, they gender people correctly. Even when they're slurring and insulting, it's still kind of funny. Jess is here. Hello, Jess. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Since I've interrupted myself anyway, I see a bunch of folks here. Lovely to see you all. AJ's here, right-handed Sith, of course. David, the human Tommy. I think I already said right-handed Sith. I'm losing track already. And a bunch of other folks. I see Anarchic Fox, and there's probably more. And hello, all you lurkers. Hello, all you people watching in the future. Thank you all so much for joining. Do remember to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because I do this show when I have both the availability and just plain ability. And so it can be a little unpredictable. So make sure you turn those notifications on so you can join us next time, because we'd love to see you in the live chat. And Deviant is here as well. Hooray. All right, continuing on. For the purpose of this manifesto, however, the phrase trans woman is at times used to refer to those individuals who identify, present, or live more or less as women despite their birth sex assignment to the contrary. Trans men, likewise, is used to describe those who identify, present, or live as men despite the fact they were perceived otherwise at birth. While this operational definition leaves out many trans people who do not conform to the male-female dichotomy, or those who are transgendered in other ways, which, coming from an intersex author, duh. It is our hope that they will recognize enough similarities between issues that we all face and find our analysis somewhat useful in their own struggles as well. Trans feminism is primarily a movement by and for trans women who view their liberation to be intrinsically tied to the liberation of all women and beyond. It is also open to other queers, intersex people, trans men, non-trans women. We weren't using the retronym cis at the time. Non-trans men and others who are sympathetic towards the needs of trans women and consider their alliance with trans women to be essential to their own liberation. And that references earlier feminist theory, or at least calls out to it, where, Simone de Beauvoir and many others over the years have pointed out that men should be feminists because the patriarchy doesn't just hurt the women that the men love, but them too. The patriarchy hurts everyone. Everyone should be a feminist because liberation for all is good for all of us. Historically, trans men have made greater contributions to feminism than trans women. We believe that it is imperative that more trans women start participating in the feminist movement alongside others for our liberation. And that's another reason that we have these so-called gender criticals, the conspiracy theorists, are so big mad, because while everyone understands why a trans man might participate in feminism, they're like, oh, well, you were assigned female at birth. And if you're a bioessentialist, you say, well, if you're female, you're always female. If you're Christian, you're always Christian. Wait, never mind. That's a different argument. They understand there's an obvious link between trans men and women's rights. For example, reproductive rights, bodily autonomy. Duh. They have a harder time with trans women, even though it's the trans women who experience the misogyny and the increased rates of violence and more of the harassment and so on and so forth, because it's a violation of the patriarchal hierarchy. And consequently, by enforcing that patriarchal hierarchy on other women, they're exempting themselves from the feminist movement. Oops, I guess. But I suppose the pay is better on that side. Who's to say? Trans feminism is not about taking over existing feminist institutions. Instead, it extends and advances feminism as a whole through our own liberation and coalition work with all others. It stands up for trans and non-trans cis women alike and asks cis women to stand up for trans women in return. Transfeminism embodies feminist coalition politics in which women from different backgrounds stand up for each other, because if we do not stand up for each other, nobody will. And that's a very person who lived through the 90s thought. Whomst among us didn't watch Captain Planet or a similar show at some point during your formative years and get that indoctrination drilled into your head? If you don't make a difference, who will? If you say not me and everyone else says not me, then who's going to do it? Clearly, you have a moral duty, an obligation, you might say, to stand up and do the right thing. Duh. It's very obvious. And yet, despite that, we still have trouble getting people to, pick up their own litter even. I don't know about humans sometimes, fam. So obviously this goes on. It's 15 pages long, and it is a hell of a read. The question of male privilege gets addressed. Remember, this is from 2001, so some of the terminology is a little outdated, like the fact there's no reference. It's non-trans rather than cis in here. But it talks about the essentialist problem, and there's a lot in here, and it's very, very much worth a read. And Emi gave us that. An intersex woman gave us the Trans Feminist Manifesto. She never got enough recognition in her life for her contributions. Some people absolutely gave her recognition, but it's saddening to see someone go and have only the people who really, really knew that person even make a peep about it. I hope we can do better in the future. I hope we can remember her better in the future. Because she wasn't just a passionate, engaged, inspiring advocate and trailblazer in her own right. She was a brilliant philosopher. She brought us new ideas. She affected the flow of history in her own lifetime, a thing that only a very few people have ever managed to accomplish. I wish I'd known her, rather than just known of her. All right, good news time. Good news, everyone! Our next story, this one's just a short, quick update. Vida Rangel, you may have heard, a trans woman won another election. She posted this earlier, Tuesday, Wednesday, probably Wednesday. It's hard to keep track of the days, folks. I'm doing my best. She posted, "I woke up this morning as the first openly trans person of color ever to win an election in DC. Proud to get to work for and represent my communities. Happy birthday to me and happy Pride." And I fucking love that energy. She's just like, let's get this done. And holy shit, does Washington, D.C. need the help with the federal administration doing everything they can to wreck all the green spaces or turn some spaces that aren't supposed to be green a little more green. They're going to need their civic representatives to keep the city from burning down. So there's that. It's just a quick update. It's a city level election, but it's kind of delightful. And we need all the good news we can get these days. There's also more good news. It's somewhat contentious, but overall, relatively positive. Everyone's favorite recent trans high school athlete, A.B. Hernandez, is back in the news. She did it! Her mom celebrates. So A.B. Hernandez won 2 events at California State Track and Field Championships the previous Saturday. and finished third in another, and each time shared the podium with a cisgender runner-up, because the way, as you've probably heard before, the way California's laws are trying to reconcile California's civil rights laws, which dictate that everyone gets civil rights, period, and federal civil rights laws, which, or more precisely, executive orders, which say certain people, particularly trans people, have no rights whatsoever, is to kind of just do both. So the current way they're handling girls' sports is when a competitor is known to be trans, and remember, no one is entitled to your medical information. While sports teams might require physicals or whatever the hell else, to participate, you have to follow the requirements of the sports governing body, but you do not have to give them any additional information beyond that. Just a tip. Whenever a trans person, a known trans person, is involved in sports in the state of California, if they place, they do get their award in compliance with the state law. Like if you place first, you get the gold medal. But in order to try to appease federal law for the purposes of awards generally, it's as if you're invisible. You basically don't exist. So if you win first, the second place person also wins first. It's participation trophies for cis kids, I suppose. And for the most part, it doesn't really matter, because trans people notoriously do not do well in sports. There are very few of us. In fact, I looked it up recently, and there are exactly 27 trans people in all of sports who are considered noteworthy. And I don't even mean like big time celebrities, just noteworthy. We're not that common. Emi Hernandez, however, is one of the very, very few who is extremely gifted. If nobody knew she were trans, she would be the most celebrated student athlete in California right now. But because she's part of a minority group that it's currently okay to hate, half the state hates her. And the fact that a bunch of adults are hating a child kind of tells you everything you need to know about fascism and gender criticalism. But I repeat myself, don't I? Despite all that, she did compete, she did win, she did good. But even so, even though people would tell you that she is the most masculine, testosterone-ridden thing to ever compete in any games in all of recorded history, she still managed to place third in an event. It turns out that even a trans person who is very gifted at a certain sport still isn't invincible somehow. According to the Bigot Brigade, it shouldn't be possible for a mere girl to beat her. And yet here we are, she placed third. How did that happen? Were the first and second place people in that event also trans? Or could it be that you can be a good athlete and just be a good athlete? Very, very shocking, very strange. So, despite negative headlines across far-right media, a 17-year-old California girl walked away a state champion with 2 gold medals around her neck. Just days after graduating high school in Jurupa, out transgender teen Emi Hernandez. And remember, visibility matters. Every person who's able to come out, who feels safe or who feels confident or whatever the case may be, there are risks. Ask me how I know. But for every one of us who stands up and comes out and is visible, 100 others might get the confidence to step out themselves. Visibility really matters, even if you're a relatively small YouTuber. I mean, after all, we've caused quite a bit of trouble, haven't we? By simply existing. My goodness. So, Emi Hernandez won the girls' high jump and triple jump in the CIF track and field state championships. Saturday's wins at the Clovis meet marked her second consecutive year placing first in those events, making her a 4-time state championship. All the way through high school. Hell yeah, we love to see it. Hernandez's achievements in track and field and her participation in girls volleyball have drawn criticism and outrage from opponents of transgender athletes, including President Donald Trump, the Advocate has reported. Now, I do want to point out the reason the right wing has to focus on Emi Hernandez is because there are so few trans athletes excelling. They make it out like trans people are completely unbeatable in every sport ever, period. But all you ever hear about is Emi Hernandez or Leah Thomas, the last trans person who won anything ever, who tied for 5th in a race with Riley Gaines. If we're dominating everything all the time, then why is it only ever one of 2 names? Remember what the commissioner of the NCAA said to Congress last year, was it? Perhaps a little before. That there are, out of the 510,000 student athletes in the NCAA, there are 10 who are transgender. And that includes trans men and non-binary people. So optimistically, you're looking at 3 or 4 trans women. Just throwing that out there. The reason they have to obsess over specific athletes is because despite their claims that trans people dominate everything, we're just not out there. We're nowhere to be seen. The fact they can find 1, there should be more of us than that. There should be, because we make up between 1% and 2% of the population. So we should make up between 1% and 2% of the athlete population, but we don't. Okay, Right-Handed Sith says, how do you know? Yeah. That's a rhetorical. Ask me how I know. Because the implication, just to explain for anybody who's new, because every video is somebody's first video. I've been trying to get better about keeping my personal information the hell off of this channel because the people trying to hurt me use it to hurt me. And that's not great. But that said, some of my personal information has been out. Some of my personal information has been outed by others, what the internet folk refer to as doxing. And all of that information, someone has tried to weaponize in some way, shape, or form in order to try to hurt me. So there are risks to being open about who you are, because when I was just a science advocate with an atheistic streak, then people would just say, never mind, Ember, I don't believe that. I believe the Bible and not the science, whatever. Like, people would say rude things, but there was nothing like hate. But as an out person, a trans person, an intersex person, a women's rights person, a victims advocacy person, but it's mostly the trans thing. It's mostly the trans thing. All the other things go by the wayside when there's a culture war against one part of your identity. The rest of it doesn't really matter. The fact I'm also intersex. Well, they run around and say things like, well, there's no such thing as intersex. Or, well, surely, intersex people are actually more numerous than trans people. So clearly Ember couldn't be one of those. It's just absurd. All of these things. They try to use everything they can against you, And then things get even worse than that. They start trying to find out where you live and the names of your family members, things like that. Yeah, so there are some risks. Those of you who've been viewers for a long time have seen all of these steps along the way, But if you're a newer person, you probably don't know. So I thought I'd, give a mini explanation there. Right, and it says, all I know is that you grew up in the same generalized neck of the woods as me, but that is a big area. It's true. In fact, so my part of New York State has the largest state park in the United States. State park. There are bigger national parks, of course. That state park is so big you can fit other states inside of it. And we both lived outside of that park in an area of the state that's like, the point is, it's a very big state. It's not Texas, but there's a lot of state here. Yes. So yeah, let's see. Slick and Slaylicious says, and they try to make it seem like any and everyone who is suddenly becoming trans. We ain't new. It's true. It's so frustrating because, like, as we often talk about, we go back to the dawn of recorded history when people discovered writing. The very oldest piece of writing we have that we know the name of the author of talks about trans people. Holy shit. But okay. It's I guess it's that right-wing myopic view, the blinders. If I don't know about it, it doesn't exist. That kind of intentional ignorance that leads people to do stuff like, paint the bottom of the reflecting pool and then wonder why there's suddenly algae, and then also why the paint is coming off the reflecting pool. These people have never taken any kind of advanced thinking class, not just critical thinking, but like basic philosophy, reasoning, rhetoric, none of it. They know nothing. They're Dunning-Kruger people who don't realize how little they know about anything, and they just assume they know everything they need to know. It's that anti-intellectualism. But because it's Dunning-Kruger, you get things like that. You get amazing levels of total incompetence that backfire spectacularly at every level. And you just kind of shrug and go, yeah, that's why we keep trying to educate you. So you stop hurting yourself that way. Just saying. Oh, goodness. Right, it says, I don't want to be trans. Can I be trans instead? You sure can. You don't do that. We have a lot of TISM people in the community. We definitely stand trains around here. Trains are awesome. Trains are amazing. But do not go running around telling people you identify as a train, because they will think you're making fun of like a version of the attack helicopter joke, which is, it's not just sad and tired, but it's pretty clearly intended to be anti-trans. So just don't. I know you're not serious, but for anybody watching, please don't do that. You're going to make people think you're transphobic. Oh, goodness. Slick says, I'm a statistical data scientist studying differential privacy, the stats of privacy. I'm sorry, my monitor is very bad and I have difficult time reading things sometimes. And yeah, we marginalized people, like Ember specifically, are always at the front, especially with new abuse. There is a pretty big downside to being out as a member of multiple groups that can be potentially marginalized, because like no matter where the culture war turns next, there's a pretty high chance it'll still be aiming at me, though, and that's it keeps things interesting. So there's that. All right, so despite the fact, as we just explained, California awards the same medal to the next place person if they're cis, and that's not sexist discrimination at all. Despite that fact, that functionally, for the purposes of awards, Hernandez is invisible, doesn't exist. There's still criticism. There's still outrage from the opponents of transgender athletes, including the president. Headlines in right-wing publications included ultimate karma for trans athlete AB Hernandez. I'm not sure what the hell that means. Inside the last dance of AB Hernandez, because she graduated, she's done, and LGBTQ press conference at track meet involving trans athlete descends into chaos. Police summoned. Well, the party of let's just make shit up is apparently just making shit up. I feel like I'm always going to be in the public eye, Hernandez said in a post-meet interview with the Los Angeles Times. It's never going to go away, and that's weird, but maybe someday it'll be for something else. You know, I wonder if A.B. Hernandez goes to college, becomes an endocrinologist, and cures cancer. Will the transphobes refuse to get their cancer cured because a trans scientist came up with the cure? I feel like we should test that. We should definitely test that hypothesis. We should have a cure for cancer and watch the right wingers just literally throw themselves off the cliff like lemmings rather than be cured of cancer by a trans person. Holy shit. She also placed third in the long jump on Saturday, medaling in the event for her second year straight. Well, you can't really say straight during Pride Month, can you? In fact, Hernandez was the only jumper in this year's competition to clear 5 feet 10 inches, while her jump score of 48 feet and 8 3/4 inches was more than an inch ahead of the second place finisher. Sometimes an inch matters, folks. So back-to-back feels awesome, Hernandez told the Los Angeles Times. I couldn't get the long jump, but that's okay. She jumped 20 feet 2 1/4 inches on Saturday. Yes, we do still measure things in inches, freedom units, if you will. It's silly, I know, but that's the way we measure things here. Behind first place finisher Ellie McCuskey Hay of St. Ignace, who got 20 and 3.5 inches, and Gianna Gonzalez of Moore Park, who also got 20 feet 3.5 inches. So first and second place tied, and A.B. Hernandez was more than an inch short on that event. So are these also trans girls, or are trans girls beatable by cis girls? Multiple cis girls, even. I would love for someone to explain that to me. When it was time to stand on the podium and receive her, also, quick note, none of these, whether the things that Hernandez dominated at or this other event, the long jump, none of these were records, because they would have told you. They'd be making a huge deal out of a trans girl breaking a record, you know? They're not even records. When it was time to stand on the podium and receive her medals, Hernandez was joined all 3 times by the same 3 cisgender girls who came close but did not match her achievement. Hernandez stood alongside St. Mary's Berkeley jumper Corrine Jones, who reached 19 feet 9.5 inches. She shared the triple jump first place podium spot with Los Altos's Danielle Hughes, 41 feet 1 inch, and the high jump first place podium spot with Monte Vista's Leilani LaRuelle, 5 feet 8 inches. That's because of a CIF policy that guarantees, I believe that's the California Institute of shit, I lost the F. Not important. CIF policy that guarantees cisgender competitors a win even when they're beaten by transgender student athletes, as the Advocate has reported in the past. The Federation policy allows trans girls to compete according to, in keeping with California law, and has drawn criticism from inclusion opponents, which included Republican California gubernatorial candidate Stephen Hilton, who held a news conference outside the Veterans Memorial Stadium on Friday. California's primary elections to determine who will be on the ballot for governor are tomorrow as they write this. Tom Steyer has taken a wildly extreme position on this issue that is totally out of touch with most California families and young people, Hilton told Fox News, by which he means he himself has a position that is both extreme and wildly out of touch with most families. But we have to have the projection, don't we? Hilton stood before signs reading, "Hey, CIF, girls sports, girls only." Well, good news. You got your wish, because trans girls are girls. So there's only girls in there. Now, I would like to go even farther and include intersex people and non-binary people, because sports is a human right. I know I am not super athletic now, partly because of the whole, injury disability thing. But when I was in high school, I played virtually all the sports. I never got into softball or football for that matter, but we didn't have a girls' football team at the time. I did track, I did soccer. Okay, I didn't do swimming or wrestling or basketball. So it wasn't all the sports, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I had at least one sport every part of the year. And sometimes there was overlap. And even though I was way more of a nerd than a jock, having that team experience, it's kind of important for the kids who need that, such as, the kids who don't have a whole lot of friends and get called freak a lot. Being able to be respected for your accomplishments rather than for what kind of person you are, it makes a big difference. So yeah, I'm not a huge sports ball fan, but I am an advocate for the idea that sports is a human right. And also, potentially a human right. I'm not really sure how to transition here. Transition. Ninjester sends us a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Jester, and says, safety advisory. There are people here. In other news, a cat goddess never messaged me or sent me a way to reach her consistently for a show. I'm not sure who that's for, but hopefully you know who you are. I'm pretty sure it's Deviant. I don't know. I don't know for sure. I can't say. But my hunch is it's Deviant. Andrew says Ember has no Fs. And that's true. I'm sure that's referencing something else that I may have missed, but it's true. In fact, Ember so much does not F that's why we have the garlic bread emoji, which shows up when you type in the command _ace. Because while sex is fine, there's, effing is great if you're into that sort of thing. Have you considered garlic bread? And while we're considering things, I also want to point out, linked in the side chat and down in the description, there is our friend Miranda is still doing a fundraiser. She had to go back into surgery last night, so she's been having multiple surgeries the last couple of weeks. Way too many surgeries. She needs help with the medical stuff. So her GoFundMe is linked. It's in the side chat if you're watching now. It's in the description if you're watching in the future. Please take a second, swing by. Even if you can only contribute $1, it helps. And if you're poor like me and you can't contribute $1, I mean, I can manage $1, but if you're poor, I get it. Share the link around so people know, because it's the only way people know, We try to help our community members when we can, because that is the point of community, among other things, as I talked about at great length the other day. I know I still have to edit that thing so we can get it back up. I'm bad at my job and I'm slow. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best though. All right. Let's see. Andrew says, I fixed emojis on mobile by uninstalling and reinstalling the YouTube app. I've heard that rumor. Some people have been having trouble with that. If that's an issue that you face, maybe try uninstall, reinstall. I know you got to log back in, but on the flip side, if it makes your buttons work again, maybe it's worth it. Or maybe it's Maybelline. I don't know. It's hard to say. Noise Ending says, I've been mostly lurking, but I'll jump on the bandwagon. All right. We obviously there's more to this story. It gets into the politics and the governors saying nonsense and whatnot. But I need to move along if we're gonna, get somewhere today. So we've said quite a bit about Miss Hernandez. Congratulations to her, of course. But the story, it's self-demonstrative, she wins and none of the cis girls lose. And the governor people, the right-wing people are so mad about it She's not dominating anything. She's losing some events, or at least, not taking first and second. I don't know that third place really counts as losing, but whatever. It just shows all their bullshit is just bullshit. She's just a girl who happens to be talented in sports. Out of millions of athletes, we've got one who happens to be both trans and talented at sports. Okay, in fairness, I know there are other trans people who are talented at sports. I see you, Becky Pepper Jackson. But like somebody who's a shining star in the way that AB Hernandez is what I'm getting at. Anyway, quick break. We'll be back with another fun, interesting story of some kind. Yeah, what the hell? This show brought to you by our sponsors, me. In 2024, NASA researcher Rachel Lenz gave the world a flag made from NASA images for Pride Month. On January 20th, 2025, the incoming U.S. administration ordered that Artistic Union of Science and Civil Rights deleted. So I tracked down the original images it was made from, recreated it, and then added even more wonders of the cosmos to update the flag to the current, more inclusive form. On the anniversary of the inauguration, I released it. And it went viral several times. Now you can get a physical copy of that artwork as a full-sized flag or a large sticker, as well as space artworks of the other Pride flags: lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, ace, and new flags being added all the time. Get one for yourself or give them as gifts and celebrate Pride, celebrate science, celebrate resistance, and help support a creator fighting for human rights for all humans. Head to astralpride.com. All right, we is back. I know these are very short breaks. I need to set up some longer ones because I need more coffee, fam. I do a lot of talking when we're doing mostly tech stuff. You know what I need to do is I do have an inventory of videos to review. It's just every time I set up one of these shows, there's like a backlog of news because I haven't been able to do them as frequently as I used to. But also, so many of the videos are just terrible. They're like horrible people listing reasons why they think trans people should be thrown into incinerators. And I'm like, I could respond to that, but I don't want to, Whatever. Incidentally, if you have videos to suggest, stories to recommend, anything along those lines, you can do that on the community Discord. We do have one of those. The link is not public because there are stalkers and abusers running around. But if you contact one of the most trustworthy of mods, you know what? I will look real quick. There are people who can give you the link running around. Liliball Trades is one. She's actually runs the Discord thing. Titan, Ryan, Antjer, Eric Wander, and Jester are the Discord mods. If you get in touch with them, they should be able to fix you up with a link if you would like to join the Ember community server. I know everyone has a server, but the reason I'm mentioning it is if you have a suggestion for a video, a story, or something that you'd specifically like to see me address, like, Ember, how do I deal with this specific issue, that sort of thing, that is a good place to do that. There is a place on the server for that. So that's an option. So yay. Anyhow, I mentioned earlier that she who would not be named would come up. Behold, here she is. So to read these in proper order, because retweeting always runs backwards, let's start with the central tweet, which is actually a news story. And it says, Federal Trade Commission and some states sue the World Professional Association for Transgender Health over deceptive claims regarding the treatment of children. Agency and state partners argue WPATH's illegal claims profited its members. Now, this is a story in its own right, and there's quite a bit to this. It's the federal government acting under the executive orders of the current administration, which has declared transgender to be illegal, are now suing the World Professional Association for Transgender Health by saying that the things claimed in the WPATH standards of care are illegal. Not that they're wrong, not that they're harmful, because they're not. They're peer-reviewed best practices. But because they're illegal, because they contain the word transgender, which is illegal in this free speech country of ours. And so Lior Sapir posts about this news story and says, news, the Federal Trade Commission has just announced its lawsuit with 4 states against the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. So Lior is just reporting on the thing. He's saying, look, here's a news thing. Here's what it says. Boom. He didn't need to type that out, but you tend to get better engagement on the Twitters when you actually have text and you just aren't linking something. In fact, I doubt he's even linking it. It's just a screenshot because images do better than links, but that's neither here nor there. And then Madame Holocaust Denial comes along and retweets that, saying taking down WPATH would be the gender-critical Battle of Stalingrad. Well, she's not wrong in the scope of the metaphor, because you may recall the people who attacked Stalingrad were the actual Nazis, like the original flavor Axis power Central European nationalists. So yeah, the gender criticals attacking Stalingrad, you are the Nazis in this case. I guess it makes sense, and she's made a big deal out of Holocaust denial in the past, that she, is just kind of open about identifying with the Axis powers from World War II. But also, it's worth noting that the Nazis lost the Battle of Stalingrad, embarrassingly badly, in fact. And so, hopefully, for once, she's right. I hope that this analogy proves prophetic, because it was the Battle of Stalingrad that was kind of the turning point in the war, when the aggressors, the gender-critical Nazi army, were routed. First of all, a huge portion of the German army surrendered. They had the Russians captured over 200,000 POWs at the end of that battle. But the Germans never recovered. They just got pushed all the way back into Germany and eventually into Berlin. It's the Battle of Stalingrad that kind of ended the war in Europe, with several months delay for advancing across all that territory. You could argue that the joint action of the Americans, the British, and the French on the Western Front made it possible for the Soviets to roll over the Germans the way they did. But the fact is, the Soviets, on their own, rolled right over the Germans. Maybe the Western Front made a big difference, but we don't know. What we do know is that the Soviets rolled right over the Germans. Maybe they wouldn't have if the Western Front weren't the thing. Or the Southern Front, the whole Africa campaign, which, not to be overshadowed, there's a lot of interesting war history there, a lot of important battles. But the Russians rolled right over the Germans after that. So I kind of hope she's correct. It's going to be a hard fight. But once the gender critical, we may as well just call them Nazis at this point. They're not just nationalist Christians. They're calling themselves, they're identifying with the Axis powers. Like, it's not offensive to call you a thing that you're calling yourself, right? Like, I call myself a woman, so calling me a woman is not offensive, right? I don't understand. But in any case, I thought this tweet was worth mentioning, but also because it leads into our next news story. This one's from Aaron in the Morning. The U.S. government is engaged in a modern Red Scare, and WPATH is its latest target. Now, Aaron knows that there were a lot of other scares and culture wars right? Like there's an interesting phenomenon with these moral panics, the Red Scare, the Lavender Scare, the Mugger Scare, the Satanic Panic, the D&D Scare, all of the various scares. Americans are very scareable. They may be the most cowardly people on earth, to be honest, but whatever. All of these moral panics, I have noticed as we've done more and more research into victim advocacy and abuser behavior, that a moral panic is the functional equivalent of a smear campaign on a societal level. Remember, we've discussed before that the difference between psychology and anthropology might be considered as treating a single person versus looking at the condition of a whole society, right? If you take the things that apply to psychology and scale them up to a whole society, you can see several parallels. And moral panics are functionally identical to smear campaigns. They're abusive tactics utilized to harm some people and control the others. It's abuser behavior, scaled up. So that's neat. So Aaron knows there's a bunch of other moral panics since the Red Scare. But saying the Red Scare, everybody understand what you mean. And that's sort of the point of the communication, is to be clear. This is a thing I learned in business school, and I've been pedantic about ever since. I don't always succeed at it, but I aim at be concise, be clear, and then stop. Well, like I said, I'm prone to tangents. I don't always succeed. But the point is being concise and being clear. Saying Red Scare makes it clear, so you don't have to do a whole shit ton of parentheticals. So fair enough. Aaron says, from hospital subpoenas to funding threats to suing the organization that advocates for trans healthcare, the parallels to the Red Scare are clear. And this is from earlier today. This is fresh news. So you're welcome. Between the 1940s and 50s, the House Un-American Activities Committee and Senator Joseph McCarthy, who does in fact have here a list of names, which this is a Christmas card. It's actually a Christmas card from Miranda, which I have out because of the fundraiser for Miranda, which once again, pinned in the side chat, linked in the description. Let's help our friend however we can. McCarthy's investigations targeted Americans for their beliefs, their associations, and their speech. The mechanism was not primarily criminal prosecution. It was investigation, subpoena, and the threat of institutional destruction. Its goal was compliance through fear. That fire burned through Hollywood, through the federal government, through universities, before finally being recognized for what it is today. One of the most extreme government overreaches in American history, wielding extraordinary powers to persecute a disfavored group. Also, moral panic. Now the federal government is engaged in a structurally identical campaign, but this time it is waged against transgender people and the institutions that serve them, targeting hospitals with subpoenas, threatening organizations and nonprofits with funding cuts, and hauling medical societies before kangaroo courts in an attempt to beat them into submission. With a lawsuit filed yesterday against the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, in a transparently forum-shopped court in Texas, the administration has turned toward its most prized target of all, the central organization that advocates for trans healthcare worldwide. Now, it should be noted, WPATH sets the standards of care for trans healthcare, but it's just an association of doctors. It is a professional association for transgender healthcare. Even if you somehow destroy WPATH entirely, you just, by court order, disband the organization, I guess. Those doctors are still doctors, and they're still active in their respective disciplines. Like many of them are endocrinologists. And the American Society for Endocrinology has the same standards of care, because that's what the medical science shows us is the correct protocol, the correct way to handle things, to do the most good and cause the least harm. And the same thing goes for the American American College of Pediatricians. Forgive me. There's a fake doctor group with a very similar name. There's the American Academy of Pediatricians and the American College of Pediatricians. One of them is fake and has a name intentionally close to the other so that they can spread political propaganda while pretending to be the legitimate doctor group. It's blatant fraud, but they've been doing it for decades because they're extreme right wing. They can get away with that. Justice for all. The point is, the real pediatricians are also members of WPATH, and they have the same standards of care. Destroying WPATH will do nothing, except I guess you can claim a fascism victory or something. The lawsuit brought by the Federal Trade Commission, which, worth noting, does not regulate medical care, and the attorneys general of Texas, Alaska, Iowa, and Nebraska allege that WPATH has violated the FTC Act by engaging in deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce. Now, that's a hell of a reach because WPATH, once again, sets the standards of care, which are just guidelines. Here's how you should conduct care if you want to do the most good and cause the least harm. But of course, every individual patient's case is unique. They're not establishing protocols. They're not giving licenses to practice. They're not selling products. It's just a professional association. But okay, so they're weaponizing federal consumer protection law statutes designed to go after companies selling snake oil and fake cancer cures, which incidentally, half the Republican companies do. The complaint alleges that WPATH, quote, provided the means for medical providers to make false and unsubstantiated claims to parents in order to sell pediatric medical transition services. And this is the issue right there, transition services. Because under federal executive order, transition services are considered fraudulent because you can't actually change sex by declaration rather than evidence. That makes it fraudulent. But here's the thing, is WPATH provided the means for medical providers to make actually true claims, but we've declared them false. This goes back to the original fascism under Mussolini, declaring things by fiat. The original usage of politically correct meant when the state declares something that is not true, you had to say it was true. So you had what was actually correct and what was politically correct. So if the 4:30 train shows up at 5:20, it's actually 5:20, but it's politically correct to say that it's 4:30 because this is the 4:30 train and it just arrived. So clearly it's 4:30 because the trains run on time. And how dare you suggest otherwise? So that's what we're dealing with, is they're not false and unsubstantiated claims. They're the truth. But the federal government is just declaring them to be false and unsubstantiated claims. And now that the federal government has just declared this thing, this politically correct statement that is not in keeping with factual reality, they're using it as the basis to claim that this organization has somehow provided fraudulent services, even though they don't even provide a service. It's not just a reach, it's incredibly fucking stupid. And this is what makes them a target under consumer protection laws. That is, despite the fact that WPATH sells nothing, it is a nonprofit medical advocacy organization that publishes guidelines based on its assessment of the available science, advocating for a transgender patient population that governments and medical institutions had historically forsaken. And that's another really good point. A lot of people like to say being trans is mental illness. It's not. Sorry, but even if it were, cool. What's the treatment? Oh, it's to transition. That's what helps treat that condition. Huh. So when somebody says you should get help, you should get therapy, you should see a psychiatrist, cool. We do. We did that. The medical protocol is to transition. And shock and surprise, it fucking helps. It helps a lot because despite all the assorted bullshit, all the hate mail and bigotry and harassment and stalkers and smear campaigns, we've got 3 of them going at the same time right now. Despite all of that, despite being forced out of my job and in constant pain every day to the point I can barely fucking move, despite all of it, I'm still happier now. That's a lot of happier now. I just want to be clear about that. Its advocacy has led to expanded insurance coverage for transgender healthcare, and that's an important point too, because even now, even in a blue state like New York, trans healthcare doesn't just mean healthcare to transition with. It's not just gender-related healthcare. It's healthcare for trans people, or specifically trans and intersex people, because there's a lot of healthcare I haven't been able to access that has nothing to do with gender, but I can't access that healthcare because I'm flagged as a trans person in the system, or because of medical bigotry. A doctor will, look at my file and go, nope, and just refuse to treat, So yeah, access to healthcare for trans people is a lot more than just gender care. Recognition by every major American medical organization that gender-affirming care is legitimate medicine and an infrastructure of clinical standards that thousands of providers rely on. For succeeding in its mission, the government has deployed an unprecedented legal theory to destroy it, to try to destroy it. Or mostly unprecedented. Aha! Now the plot thickens. During the Red Scare, the federal government targeted organizations and individuals not for crimes, but for their published views. In 1949, Owen Lattimore, a professor of international relations at Johns Hopkins University, was accused by McCarthy of being a top Russian espionage agent. The evidence was Lattimore's published academic writings on China policy, which McCarthy deemed too sympathetic to communism. So he wrote a policy advisory on U.S.-China relations that McCarthy thought was too sympathetic to communism, and therefore he's a Russian agent? I'm not quite following the pieces on that one, Senator. Lattimore was indicted over testimony about his scholarly work, charges that were eventually dismissed, but not before his reputation was destroyed and he was placed on leave. The government simultaneously maintained a Hollywood blacklist that affected more than 300 people in the entertainment industry, actors, screenwriters, directors, none of whom were convicted of crimes. The government weaponized its investigatory powers specifically to make it impossible for anyone in a position of institutional influence to associate with, employ, or support people whose views ran counter to the government's preferred ideology. That's what we keep trying to point out. Trans people exist. It's not an ideology. No more than any other group. Women exist, men exist, tall people exist, and you'll have a very hard time finding an absolute objective definition for what tall means while we're at the subject. The ideology is the people who are trying to ignore facts, who are trying to ignore that reality. I don't know. I could go on a whole rant about that, but now is not the time. This is exactly the architecture we are seeing deployed against transgender healthcare today. The government is threatening any organization that opposes its stance on transgender people. The blacklist is developing in real time, and anyone who pushes back is investigated. So, too, is there a parallel in the choice of tribunal? During the Red Scare, McCarthy chose the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations because it gave him maximum control. Everyone on the committee was sympathetic to his crusade. The FTC's forum shopping follows the same logic. The government first targeted WPATH with subpoenas in Washington, D.C., the natural venue for an action by a federal agency headquartered there. But when that failed, when Judge Boasberg found extensive evidence of animus and wafer-thin justifications behind the investigations, the government did not accept its loss. Instead, it ran to the Northern District of Texas, where Trump-appointed Judge Mark Pittman and George W. Bush appointee Reed O'Connor handle virtually every civil case, and where the administration has already centralized its legal campaign against gender-affirming care. The venue justification? WPATH was originally incorporated in Texas in 1980, even though it actually operates out of Illinois and its principal place of business is in East Dundee outside Chicago. A 46-year-old incorporation filing is the thread on which the government hangs its choice to bypass the DC courts that already ruled against it and bring its case before a judge it knows will be sympathetic. Yikes. It's a hell of a reach. Not that this justification even matters, because the government is weaponizing the same forum shopping playbook against hospitals across the country. As we reported on previously, they're going after hospitals. They're subpoenaing hospital records. They're trying to get access to protected information, like not just how many patients have you given this procedure to, but what are their names? Where do they live? How old are they? What's their income? What's their social security number? They want all the information. They want to make a list of names. This is one area where they're excelling beyond McCarthy, because while McCarthy just waved around papers nobody ever got to examine, the government actually is trying to make a list of names. And we know what happens when governments make lists of names of people in a group they don't like. So when the government attempted to enforce similar subpoenas in the states where hospitals actually operate, it lost virtually every time. So what was the tactic they used afterwards? The DOJ based its investigation in the Northern District of Texas, convening a grand jury there to subpoena hospitals in New York, Rhode Island, and elsewhere, specifically to land before Judge Reed O'Connor, another reliable conservative appointee. Even a federal judge acknowledged from the bench that it is pretty clear to me this was shopped to Texas. Harvard Law's Alejandro Caraballo called it a blatant, unlawful effort by the DOJ to intimidate providers of gender-affirming care to trans youth by engaging in judge and forum shopping. And the rationale is extraordinary. If you base an investigator in Texas, you can use a Texas grand jury to demand the private medical records of children treated at a hospital in Manhattan. The government lost in the courts that play fair, so it found one that wouldn't. Now, normally, this kind of judicial malfeasance would be subject to the review by higher level federal courts, and up to and including the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court, as it happens, is currently occupied by members, shall we say, who are not all that interested in the law most of the time. So, shit. This campaign extends far beyond medical organizations and doctors, but into all organizations for any perceived political or social support of transgender people. Now, right now, it's about transgender people. But the fact is, once they demonstrate that they can pursue and persecute people for perceived political opposition, I couldn't think of a fifth P word there, I'm so sorry. But once they show they can do that, once it withstands what's left of our legal system, they can say, you believe something other than we've told you you have to believe, and they can come after you, your organization, your employer, or even you personally. They can come after you. Once they get away with that against one group, they can do it to anybody else. I've said this since the beginning. They don't care about trans people. It doesn't matter to them what happens to us. They don't mind hurting us, but they don't actually care. The point is to get that wedge between the Constitution and the wall so they can pry it the fuck off and take total control. It's you they want to come after. I'm just an easy road bump to run over. During McCarthyism, the government did not just investigate suspected communists, it demanded that institutions purge any association with disfavored views. What did I just say? It will not stay about trans people. It didn't stay about communists then. Federal employees were screened for loyalty. Teachers were forced to sign oaths. Libraries were pressured to remove books. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? The goal was not just to punish the accused, but to make the ideology itself unspeakable in public life. The Trump administration is executing the same strategy against trans people. Worth noting, all of these tricks they learned from the communist Chinese. All of this shit was in Chairman Mao's little red book. Granted, in China, they went quite a bit further when it came to, killing people and public executions and things. But still, it's almost like it's the same kind of projection. It's the same kind of projection. It's saying, hey, these communist totalitarian ideas are pretty good for totalitarian authoritarianism. So why don't we use those? How do we use those? We make everyone afraid of the communists. That way, they'll never believe that we're using the actual literal communist playbook to seize authority. It's brilliant. The goal was not just to punish the accused, but to make the ideology itself unspeakable in public life. The Trump administration is executing the same strategy against trans people. The administration's latest proposed federal rule would evaluate every federal grant recipient in America, not the grants themselves, but the recipients, for the promotion of gender ideology, defined as any acknowledgement that gender identity differs from sex assigned at birth. Well, that's kind of funny. That's pretty funny, actually, because all gender identities differ from sex assigned at birth, right? Because if you're assigned female at birth and then you're treated as a little girl and grow up to be a woman, neither of those are female. They're girl and woman. Those are gender identities that are different from the sex you're assigned at birth. On an ontological level, same thing with males, boys, men. So by, again, total incompetence, they don't understand the things they're doing or why the things they're doing are stupid. So they're doing it in the most stupid way possible. Easy first grader level mistakes that anyone with any education would have been able to correct them on if they hadn't locked them all up or driven them all away. Oops. By their definition, everyone is in violation of this policy, proposal, regulation. Does it even matter anymore? It has already forced the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to erase all references to transgender people from its materials and ordered it to dead name trans children in its missing persons reports. We've talked about this in the past too. We care so much about the children, but when a child is missing, we're not going to describe the child accurately, and we're going to use a name that's different from their name. It's almost like they're trying to help the sex traffickers. It's almost like they're trying to make sure no one ever finds these missing children. Almost like maybe some of them have a vested interest in child sex trafficking organizations, possibly to do with an island, maybe. Who's to say? It pressured RAINN, the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization, RAINN, of course, being, that we've mentioned before, the Rape, Abuse, Incest, and National Network, who runs the hotline that you can call if you're ever raped or sexually assaulted. That's what they do. They run that hotline. It's linked in the description box on every video. And also, there's an item in our merch store at astralpride.com. It's still there. You can purchase. You know what? I'll run the thing for it. I'll just run the thing for it. I'm pretty sure I still have it. I think it's this one. Hold, please. Hey, want to do something good? Recently, a person who had sent me this version of my logo, unsolicited, made public statements promoting violence against minority women and survivors of abuse. Now that person's gift will do some good instead. 100% of the proceeds from sales of this survivor's mug will go to fund the nonprofit organization RAINN in their efforts to provide vital resources to survivors and to build a future where fewer of us need this kind of help. Find this item at my store at betterthanever.com. And if you want to learn more about how you can be better at supporting survivors, check out this video, where I've distilled the best practices for helping survivors that I collected from speaking with actual crisis professionals at RAINN, Willow Grove, Vera House, and independent counselors. Whenever you can turn the harmful acts of others into something good, that is an epic win. So yeah, that mug is still available. It has nothing at all to do with the theme of the store now as astralpride.com, but it's still there because we still care about helping survivors. And incidentally, it's not just one video anymore. It's now an official course. I think there's 4 videos now, and the playlist for that course is linked in the description box too. So they fucked with RAINN. They forced them to remove all support for LGBTQ plus survivors. Because if you get raped and you're a lesbian, fuck you. If you're a gay person and you get sexually assaulted, go to hell. If you're an otherwise cis individual who happens to be bi or queer or whatever, well, that's the point, isn't it? To make it easier to assault people, to harass them, to abuse them, to hurt them, to threaten them, to kill them, to traffic them, to rape them. That is the #1 priority of the rapist administration, isn't it? So naturally, that's what they would do. Now, to be clear, RAINN will still talk to you if you're a survivor. They just aren't allowed to make specialized support for LGBT people part of their official programming. The counselors still know how to counsel. They know how to do. You're still a person, right? Like whether you're a man, a woman, a non-binary person, an elderly person, a teenager, they're there to help. And what kind of sexuality you have isn't super relevant to trying to survive. Because whether you're gay or not, if a man rapes you, it's still rape. Whether you're a lesbian or a straight woman, if someone assaults you, it's still assault. What you're interested in doesn't have anything to do with what was done to you. So they can still help you. The federal government is trying to make it harder, but they can't stop them. So if you do need their help, do feel encouraged to reach out, contact them. On a related note, the federal mental health emergency hotline has been ordered to restore the suicide prevention hotline services for LGBTQ plus youth. Grudgingly. Now they're trying to take credit for it. We brought back 988 service for LGBT youth. Yeah, because you were ordered to. because you lost that court case too. You did that illegally. My goodness, if only elected officials could be held accountable for intentionally breaking laws. You know, if we had like laws or something in this country. Holy shit. The administration also scrubbed federal websites of scientific studies on trans health, removed data on transgender populations, erased the word transgender from the Stonewall National Monument, which is the birthplace of modern LGBTQ plus rights, led by trans people. The Republican-controlled states have in some cases barred trans teachers from classrooms, or in some cases, like we said at the top of the show, intersex teachers that they just thought might be trans, because that's enough now too. During the Red Scare, the Attorney General maintained a list of subversive organizations. Today, the federal government is building something just as powerful, a regulatory infrastructure that treats the mere acknowledgement of transgender people as grounds for institutional punishment. This chapter in American history will be remembered alongside the darkest abuses of government power against disfavored groups. What is happening now to transgender people is structurally identical to those prior abuses. The administration has rejected every check on its power. When courts rule against it, it moves to friendlier courts. When medical organizations push back, it investigates them too. Functionally identical to a smear campaign. If you call out the smear campaigners, you get put on the list as well. WPATH is the latest target. But this will not stop WPATH. It will continue until transgender people have nowhere left to turn for care, for recognition, or for the basic dignity of being acknowledged as human beings. Unless, as in every previous era of persecution, enough people recognize what is happening and say enough. Now, to turn that the other way around, what works to end a campaign of terror, a moral panic, is enough people saying, this is stupid, this is harming people, enough, stop it. The same thing works reversing the large scale to the small. A moral panic is functionally identical to a smear campaign. So smear campaigns can be stopped by enough people stopping them, getting in the way of the abusers and refusing to allow them to continue to abuse their targets. Just going to throw that out there for future reference, probably, or something. As always, there's so much more I could say, so much more we could get into, but good news, we actually finished the last story I definitely wanted to get to today, and we did it at exactly the right amount of time, because starting in just 2 minutes over on Skeptic Haven, our friend AJ is going to have our good friend Dr. Ben on to talk about gender healthcare. I'm sure you can see how it relates, so consider this a transition to another set of hosts on a very closely related topic. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I very, very much appreciate all of you. If you're just joining us now, please remember to hit subscribe before you go and ring the notification bell so you can join us live next time, whenever that may be. And as always, until then, try not to die. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for May, Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Maya Adkisson, Robin Webster, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Lil of All Trades, Deviant Outcast, Thriver Scapegoat, Katie Bluebird, Noise Ending, The Godless Engineer, Secular Felinist, and Elira the Free. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember, or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which also includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going Thank you so much. Because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.